Yeah, I think that's going to lead us into the next topic is like after we prioritized, like you said, both business types are going to prioritize the known sellers, make your money where you know you're going to make it. And then we're going to move on to like the business goals. So right now at Braxton's, I'll use this as an example, is we have a huge gap in our cat can section. And a lot of reps that have come in have pointed it out. And I am in no hurry to fill that gap necessarily. I want to make sure that I interview everybody properly. So I like to use the trade shows because you meet um, higher people, higher reps, maybe like even owners. Yesterday we met some owners of brands, just that they could speak a lot more passionately about it, a lot closer to it. They have all the numbers usually. Um, so I like to set business goals, whether that is between product categories or another goal we have is we want to grow our bottom line just in deals this year at a certain percentage. Um, so I know I have to execute on a certain amount of goals or certain amount of discounts or something like that. So those two types of things are what I usually operate off of is just what is our end of year goal for financially, and then also what is the quarterly goal? What is the goal prioritize with product categories? So right now, cat cans, I want to make sure that I check out a couple different brands at one time to make sure that I'm making um, the best informed decision I can make for that department. Not a department that's growing, so I'm not in a huge rush. We don't have people banging down the door for any kind of brands. So I can take my time and really evaluate which one will be probably the best partner or make my best educated guess on that.
You also mentioned ISOs, which I guess, I don't know if that's something we'll talk about later, but that goes along with new product purchases. And I guess you also talked about the goals, which I wasn't thinking was just like straight in just basically your show and your budgets. But yeah, when you bring up the goals, over the last several years, we've talked about breaking down your inventory and then starting to rebuild it. And now that we have the inventory really nailed down to the place that we want, is future projecting some healthy goals to execute only on the most profitable deals. And that can be measured in many different ways. And I tend to compare different types of measurement over time. So that can be dollars per day. So this is like Tiff said, knowing your numbers. So if you're going to buy a dog food that you sell 10 a week, and maybe at the end of the day, you get $100 discount on a purchase. That's probably a little excessive, but square round numbers it's $10 a day, right? Or maybe you had to buy twice as much. You had to buy 20, you typically would buy 10, but you got $100 back. Now it's $5 a day. When you clean up your numbers to make it simple like that, if you have your average daily sales and you know the discount that you're getting at the show, you can use a metric that simplifies the decision process. So you can compare $5 a day deal against a $3 a day deal. It becomes pretty simple math once you are able to break it down. The harder math is knowing your numbers, right? Having your average sales, knowing what each product takes to sell, how long it's going to take to sell the buy-in, the deal, what's the dollar discount? Because maybe they're giving you free product, but then you have to say, oh, it's a $40 bag and I'm getting two of those for free. That's an $80 deal. And again, it's going to take me maybe 20 days to sell that deal. And now we're at $4 a day that we can measure. But it's really, if you take a step back and you objectively look at your inventory as dollars, which is literally what it is, those are just dollars sitting on the shelf. And you take a simple metric like $1 per day, there are more complex ways to measure it, but that's a super easy way to understand how to compare one deal against the next deal. And if you go into a show and there's something that is a high turn item, something that's always selling, very confident that's going to continue to sell, and it has a better deal, this is where, when you're not cash constrained, you can make the decision, gosh, this is $6 a day. This one's $3 a day. I should probably just double down on the $6 a day deal and not even bother with the $3 a day deal if we're coming up to the edge of our budget. If you can execute on both and that makes sense for you, that's great. But I find that simplification, so the top constraint is your budget, what you're going in and intending to spend. But the next thing is, now that you know what you're going to spend, is how do you compare one deal against another? And it becomes very difficult because all the deals are different, right? So get this free product, get this percent off, get these dollars off, all sorts of crazy ways that the deals are being offered to you. So simplifying to some type of metric that allows you to compare a dog food deal to a treat deal to a cat toy deal, then makes your decision making way easier once you understand the deals and how the dollars relate to those buy-ins.
Yeah, and definitely use your numbers in by category too, because if you're trying to compare dog toys to cat toys, and the cat toys discounts substantial, but your cat toy section only sells X amount a day, you're more advantageous to take the lower discounted dog toys because you're going to sell through them that much quicker. Knowing your numbers huge by category, especially if you have a plan to bring in something, you got to know what it needs to do and how it needs to perform. And be able to ask the questions of their other clients to see if that's how it's performing at their store. Let's see. So we've talked about how to set a budget, and I want to get into how to evaluate, read between the lines on some of these deals because when you're looking at a stack of 50 papers, oh, one point I wanted to make because you talk about simplification and ordering and just cutting it down to 5 deals if you were going to make 10, make it simpler on you. I think there's something to be said about the mental load of trying to fill out all this paper. And it's if you could just prioritize those top 3 to 5 deals, you don't have to read through 50 different sheets, and just the mental load is just exhausting itself. I think that kind of helps with the decision-making process if you're not exhausted by the end of the day from looking through all these sheets.
Yeah, and I like the idea of elimination first. So in any deal book that has 50, 100 pages, or some of these catalog come in at 500 pages, they're just insane. And I like the first run to be just elimination. So you could probably tear the book in half in less than a minute. You know, there's just half of these pages that have no relevance to you. They're not in the categories you sell. They're not the products that you have on the shelf. They're just not favored products. They're not categories that are selling well. You literally can just rip those off. And then once you have to begin to compare deals and you have to put these thought cycles in that Tiff is talking about, is you could quickly go through a second round and take 2 or 3 minutes and just say, you know what? Shrinking category, not selling. All right, we're not going to add more inventory here. Boom, boom, knock another half out of that. And then you end up with the sweetheart deals that are the categories that you're looking at, the products that you know sell. And you just end up looking at, like Tiff said, maybe a small show, 3 to 5 deals that really have your interest. Maybe it's a big show and you've got 10 to 20 deals that you have to really consider to make sense. But it can be extremely overwhelming. So I just find elimination as your first step to be maybe 2 rounds of elimination as your first and second step before you even start to think. I find that's a better and faster way to look at a deal book because it can just be overwhelming if you go page by page trying to make a decision on every single page.
Yeah, those like you said, the deal books can get pretty thick. So don't want to waste the mental bandwidth if we don't have to. So we talked about how to evaluate current products. We know our data, we know our numbers, we know what we're going to execute on. So we don't have to put too much thought into that other than making sure we stay within the constraints of our budget. But let's talk about deals and ISO deals that are of new products, stuff we don't have sales history on, because that's where we have to make our best educated guess and read through the lines on some of the promos they might be offering on deals at shows. I see a big one is usually raffle giveaways of some sort, just things that are meant to look good. And if you take all that away, are you still getting a good deal at the end of the show? The deal can't rely on you potentially winning a Yeti cooler. And it has to make sense for our stores specifically. So,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Is make the deal on the sake of the deal, and the other fluff is gravy if it works. Okay, that's just fun stuff, but shouldn't be calculated in.
yesterday we went to Generation Pet in Maryland's show, which is a small East Coast distributor. I believe they're only on the East Coast, but smaller distributor. So it was a little bit easier to walk the floor in a reasonable time and kind of meet and really get to know some of these brands that we've carried for a long time. But one of the brands that I'm sure a lot of anybody that sells cat food is very familiar with was Weruva. So they had a nice thick sheet, probably the thickest one because they have the most lines. I knew before going there, I was looking for a new cat brand, like cat cam brand, and I was looking for maybe a line extension. So anything new or anything like that that's already of a good growing brand with us. So I knew with Weruva, we sell about $1,300 per week in retail dollars, and that's over about 90 different SKUs. So we do quite a bit of just physical volume for them. So anything I found was probably going to be a good fit if it was within their lines, basically. Our customers already attached to the brand, they understand it, they're familiar with it. So their ISO deal for this show was 25% off open stock, which love open stock deals because it just makes it that much more flexible. You probably see that those are a lot less discounted if you don't do like bundle deals and everything. And this is minimum 10 unique SKUs, max 3 cases per SKU. So knowing that I sell 90 different SKUs, finding my 10 best sellers was probably going to be very easy. But what I did look at was since we have contract pricing with Gen Pet, we already get a reasonable discount on Maruva. After I factored in what our contract pricing in, that 25% quickly became 20% at the deal. And then I believe the fluff piece was if you bought $500 worth of product, you got entered into a raffle for the entire booth that they had brought with them, which was like a bunch of different products, which is funny because I believe the strategy before for vendors was to wait till the end of the day or end of the sales day to try and negotiate with whoever was left to try and offload what they had at a good reasonable discount. And I think that you're just using it as a unique way to raffle it instead of discounting it away as an incentive to get more of the sales. Is that kind of what it used to be, Dave?
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, there were people and stores that would go to shows with the intention of actually buying out booths because for the manufacturer, the inventory there is almost definitely written off. You've shipped it, you've set it up, you've taken it all out of the boxes. It's not really resellable. So why do you want to break it down, box it up, and haul it back to your warehouse? Just go ahead and sell it. So I think you're right to some degree. It's okay. They just want to raffle it off, and somebody ends up sure they see it that as a perk, and that's great for the store. It's great for Ruva to get rid of that product because it's really not resellable, sellable product because they've opened everything up. So I think it's probably a win-win. I would say as a comment, because we've been so strict on inventory, this is one of those cases that exactly to the point you brought up earlier is the raffle is the fluff. You have a whole booth of Weruva. We have 90 SKUs. They've got who knows how many SKUs in the booth, how many products we don't carry. And it becomes a real question. Do we even want to shelve that product? Do we even want to sell that product? Or do we take the raffle, assuming we were to win it, shelve the product that is in line with our interests and our current sales product? And then you just have to decide through elimination, liquidation, the process that we had talked about before to move product that has not earned a shelf space. So it's like an interesting conundrum, right? You're getting a whole bunch of free product, but you really have to decide, should that product end up on your shelf or not? In our case, we have pretty strict standards. If we didn't decide to bring it in and pay for it, we probably won't put it on the shelf.
Yeah. Whenever I see a raffle, I don't even look at that. Like, I'm just like blinders on. I'm like, I don't need a Yeti cooler. Otherwise, I'd get 50 coolers. So Weruva, even though the discount ended up being from 25 to 20% after you looked at what our contract pricing was, still a great deal. I had just used that as a tool to say, let's say Weruva wasn't as good of a seller. Would that knock it below something else I wanted to buy that we would get better pricing on and better turns on? So just little nuanced things to kind of think about when you're evaluating and your contract and your tier pricing still exists. So you got to think about it.
Quick note too, Tiff, not only, I'm not sure that anybody actually pays a catalog price. And when they do present their discounts, it is often off of a catalog. So the 25% deal here, the 30% deal there, they're presenting best case scenario sounds best. But the reality is just as Tiff explained, you might be getting a lesser deal because you're already buying it every day lower than what they're showing you. The other thing we have to understand is if you're buying from multiple vendors, does you not only have to look at the contract price from the vendor, the distributor that you're dealing with at the show, you also have to look at, is that your best pricing across all of the vendors that carry that particular product? So just understand that when they present discounts at a show, you have to evaluate that against your actual day to day costs from your best vendor and then measure the deal against that price, not against what they're showing you.
Exactly. Yeah. So another goal we had yesterday was to evaluate a new brand for our cat can section. And ideally, I like to look at least 3, if possible, brands whenever I'm talking food, just because it's such an important decision, because they're more partners than anything when it comes to new products. So there was 2 brands and they both had ISO deals, 20%, both open stock, 20% off on one, mix and match. There had a minimum of 8 SKUs, so I knew I had to bring in a certain amount. And then the other one was 30% off, but no minimums of any kind. So I could pick and choose literally whatever I wanted. So you do the standard process of interviewing, the thing we talked about, I believe it was last week when we talk about questions to ask reps about where their business is at, where it's going, and then finally get to the product itself. And once you get that information and you can make a balanced decision about which one be a better partner, then you can finally look at that discount to leverage the other one. So the 20% off one was to me, a better proposition brand, but I was able to take the information I took from the other brand and say, hey, they're doing 30% off. Can you match that or do better? But it gave me negotiating power because there was competing offers and the rep wanted to make the deal at the end of the day, they're going to come up on that percentage. Sometimes they do a little pushback, like, I don't know if I can do that, or I don't like car salesman wise. If you could tell them, hey, I sell X amount of cat food every year. Do you want in on this kind of volume or not? Like you can, if you know your numbers and you know what you can offer them from your store's perspective, that just gives you more leverage to squeeze them a little bit to get that little extra value. Otherwise, you might as well just go with the other brand that gives you that better discount if you still thought they were a good choice. But having leverage, evaluating 2 or 3 at a time just gives you that negotiating power.
You always have to think about these things. And I love the idea of using the comparative analysis across several brands in order to leverage one company's deal against another company's deal. And hey, you know what? You might have a preference for A and their deal is just not as good, but your preference is probably more important than the extra percentage because at the end of the day, your customers have to buy it from your store. The long term prospect is more important than the dollars today. But I love that idea of being able to compare similar brands, compare similar deals, and then use the best deal against the one that you prefer. That's a great way to negotiate. The other thing we always look at is Tiff used the term partner, which I agree with manufacturers that we want to build a relationship with over time. We want it to be a partnership. And the truth is we do that with the vendors as well. So when we ask for discounts, we're not always beating them up over the best price. We're not always going back and forth and negotiating, but this is an important skill to practice. And a one off for an ISO is a wonderful place to do it. And then you can partnership on how they're going to help you. Are they going to do demos? Are they doing great marketing? Are they going to do co op dollars? And these things are outside of the ISO, but this is part of the manufacturer interview that Tiff talked about. It's like, how involved are you going to be in growing your own brand? But I just wanted to say it's more than just the negotiation. You want to build the long term relationship, but don't be afraid of negotiating either. Just don't make that the only point.
Yeah, definitely. And then we talk about these new products. We want to know how much we need to bring in because sometimes, like I said, there was a couple of them that had minimums of you need to buy 3 cases of something. That's all negotiable too. Because if I'm bringing in a cat food can and I know my best cat food turns X on every 2 weeks, I really don't want to go outside my best. So I don't want to order 3 months if that would be the number, 3 months outside of that, if that would be the required minimum. So pretty much everything's on negotiation table, and if it's not, you could walk away. But I don't want anybody to force me to buy more than what I actually want of a new product when I have no data to support how much it would actually sell, no matter how big of a discount. If it's like one of those progressive, if you buy $500 worth of it, you get 10%, 1,000, 20%, and then up and up. I don't want to be pushed towards those higher tiers if it violates my inventory carry of the department itself.
Yeah, and I think conversely, you had talked about maybe one deal being 8 SKUs. Well, it's another thing you kind of have to think about and pre-plan is if you're going to introduce a brand new product, it's almost better to go shallow, meaning lower inventory count, and wide, meaning multiple SKUs. And then as your customers show you what's the most favorable product, start to call out the losers and double down on the winners. So it's think about new introductions is you should not be doing so many new introductions that you cannot focus on the best ones. And we had talked about preferred end caps at Braxton's, what's going to show the best, how are we going to support the brand within our store so that our customers get exposed to it. So sometimes going shallow and wide to start with is a good way because you need to give the brand a good presentation to start off with.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think we talked about it last week was like we'd seen somebody do a deal where they just bought in depth and not width, and they one had storage issues and knew that they couldn't offload it in a certain amount of time, so they had to start discounting it right away and just losing whatever you earned at that store or at that show. So, like, depth is just kills you because the storage space, the thought process behind that. Some of these stores are smaller stores, so if you buy 50 bags of one food, it could be 50, 30-pound bags of one food. It definitely can get a little spacious, space consuming. So definitely thinking about that when talking about depth, not just inventory turn. So we've talked about how to set a budget, how to set a plan, how to execute the plan. We've talked a couple examples of how to look through these deals. Is there anything you can think of that we have not covered in this topic so far?
And I have a note I wanted to comment on. I think when we explain our process and the rules and budgets and the criteria, I think a lot of people who start a business because they're passionate about pets and they want to focus on building their business so they can serve more people, they tend to be more creative minded. And all of these constraints feel restrictive. But I want to say, what you commented on the mental freedom, right? So when you know exactly what you want and what you need to focus on, it actually feels better because you can think more deeply about just those few things that you want to do. And I really wanted to comment is when we're more strict on the back end, we can have more freedom on the front end. So if we can know our numbers and go into a show knowing exactly what we want to focus on, when we have the extra cash flow and capital, we actually have more freedom to look at new products and expand into areas that we were thinking about, maybe not yet certain. So if this seems restrictive, if this seems that this is going to be hard to do, it actually gives you more clarity. It actually helps you think more clearly, and it actually gives you more freedom once you have these systems in place.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, something that used to be pretty stressful was when I first started and I didn't have the clarity, I didn't know the numbers, and going to these shows, it was a bit overwhelming. So definitely now it's like you can go and just execute without stress, and you can enjoy and focus more on the relationship building and the reps and understanding their businesses a little bit more in a deeper fashion. So I definitely appreciate that it does bring clarity when you know this kind of information. So we have our budget set before we go. We have our priority list is we're going to prioritize items that we have sales data on and that are good sellers and try to replicate good sales on good sellers. We're going to define what it other goals we might have if we're not cash flow constrained when we're attending these shows. We're going to try and get the best ROI. We're going to try and get the new item filled. We're going to try and grow a department that's growing. Another goal we had yesterday when we went to Gen Pet was we were looking at any kind of freeze dried expansion just because that category is just blowing up like crazy. So just from a consumer side, we're going to know our minimum turn expectations for any products before we walk on the floor. We're going to know that you can safely assume that you don't have to make any final decisions in the booth or on the trade show floor. You can go have lunch, sit down for a little bit because I hate high pressure sales. I hate making decisions on the fly, but we're going to stick to our plan, stick to our budget. The best buyers at the shows are boring. They walk in with a plan, they work the plan, and then they go home. The excitement is not the job, the shelf performance afterward is.
That actually makes another good point is we can talk about this maybe in a future episode because we haven't really discussed it per se, but if you're dealing with a new product, having like an after action, we did talk about how long we might give different departments before we check back with them. But this is also true of a show deal. Do does reality match your estimations from earlier? So when you're going to a show and you're making certain assumptions, although you're using your data and you're using your sales history, you have to check your projections against reality. So like you're saying, is the excitement is watching the shelf perform. Okay, we loaded an end cap with a great deal that we had and we presented well because now we have a little bit of extra inventory because we got a discount on it. And then you watch that over the next couple of days, couple of weeks and check back on your assumptions against performance. This is just a feedback loop again that helps you get better and better. But this is especially true if we did take on a new product or filled in a line extension with products that we don't currently sell. So it's always good to look at the shelf, look at the customer flow, look at the interaction. Did our mental shape of the world actually match the real world? And it's a great way to check back in with your gut or your assumptions from earlier.
So this roundtable marks the end of our inventory discussion because I know that's Dave's favorite topic. So we're going to be moving on to leadership and more specifically leadership when it comes to your employees. So next week we're going to be talking about how to hire the right people for your store. The week after that, we're going to talk about onboarding and training those employees, building a team that retains and grows, and managing performance and making the hard calls when it comes to letting bad employees go, basically, or employees that are just not performing well. So that's going to be the next 4 weeks laid out. But we're so glad that Dave, you could be here and talk about your favorite topic for the last 4 weeks. I think we've covered it very thoroughly. If you haven't seen any of those episodes, I will link them in the classroom and on the YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, link them below so that you can reference any of them that you feel like you might need to follow up on.
The old adage of hire slow, fire fast, as long as you can do it in a compassionate way. Look, not everybody is built to work with us or in our store or to help customers. And we've been here for 88 years. And I've been doing this. What did we decide, Tiff? The 35 years, something like that, straight through as an adult. You've been in multiple industries yourself, dealing with different levels of people. And, currently here, you've been here 5 years, mostly in the employee management side of things, as well as buying and other admin work. Um, I think the thing is just understand that not everybody belongs here. It doesn't have to be, this is a good person, this is a bad person. It's just like this person's behaviors do not sync with our philosophies and they will probably perform better somewhere else. So we have to give them that opportunity. It sounds that's a soft way to say that you're firing someone. Yeah, you're firing, but your job is to protect your customer, your best employees, and your business. That's your job as a business owner or a manager. You have to protect your business and you have to protect your best employees. And by doing that, you're going to do the best for your customers. So just remember, yeah, it's harsh. Yes, firing somebody, getting rid of somebody off your team is emotionally taxing. Uh, but it's really about the bigger picture that we have to stay focused on in order to do it.
I call all my firings mutual breakups. It's way, way easier. So, but we will get into that entire discussion over the next month. But until next time, we'll see you then.